Hello everyone. Tonight we step into a world full of blood and ruthless power, where glittering crowns are woven with cold steel blades and sinister schemes. This is the story of the Tudor queens, women who stood at the pinnacle of glory, but were only inches from death. Forget the glamorous image, because the truth is, you wouldn't survive a single day without knowing how to play this deadly game. Before you lean back and get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy the content I share. And leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see people following from all over the world. Now turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some background noise, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. Take a deep breath, because tonight, you're no longer yourself. You've just officially become the wife of King Henry VIII, the anointed of God, the bearer of the scepter, and also the man with a habit of cutting off his ex-wives' heads when he's bored. Congratulations, you've just stepped into one of Europe's grandest palaces, Hampton Court, and condolences, because you've also stepped into a gilded trap. Your room is vast, the ceiling is high, the walls are draped in silk, and as cold as the heart of the king who left after the wedding to sleep in another chamber. It's not that you're not beautiful enough, not that you're not virtuous enough. It's just that he's weighing whether to keep loving you or not, and that's always a shaky signal for your delicate neck. You step down from the royal bed, your feet touching a Persian embroidered rug, soft but cold. Your hand brushes the silk shawl around your shoulders, woven in Venice, dyed in Florence, now soaked with your sweat of fear. On the table, a jug of red wine remains from last night's feast. Beside it, an ivory comb that two maids are arguing over whether to style your hair in the Spanish or French fashion. You sit, nodding out of habit. No one asks your opinion, of course. You're the queen, not a person. Everything you do is a ritual, from breathing at the right pace, as you pass the chapel to smiling just enough at breakfast with the king. Every blink could be interpreted as rebellion, or worse, not charming enough. Outside the window, morning mist drapes the Tudor garden, where roses are planted in the shape of a cross. You gaze at them, wondering if one day your head might be buried beneath. A soft female voice speaks. Your Majesty, your attire is ready. You nod, stand, and let three women begin the 30-minute dressing process. Not because you have so much to wear, but because each layer feels like a chain. First, a linen chemise, then a corset, so tight you forget where your lungs are. Next, the petticoat, the main gown, the bodice, the belt, earrings, lace collar, and finally a cloak heavier than a dungeon wall. When it's done, you're no longer a person but a walking statue, a display piece for the dynasty. You're led to the breakfast hall, where the king isn't present. For the third time in a row, one of his attendants bows, apologizing on his behalf, saying the king has state matters. You don't ask, you're not allowed to. Deep down you know, state matters often means a blonde maid being attended privately in his study. You pick up a silver spoon, sip cold oatmeal, and remember you ate better as a commoner. But back then, you weren't the target of plots, living among people who smile at you and are ready to accuse you of treason if you accidentally frown when the king tells a bad joke. A bell rings, morning prayers. You stand, walk solemnly to the chapel. A maid adjusts the crown on your head, whispering, "The Archbishop is here today." You understand today, you must be especially devout. For God, for the court, and most importantly, for your life, you pray, but not for faith. You pray the king won't change his mind, that he won't think you're too cold, or too clever, or too much like the wife he had beheaded. After the service, you return to your room, sit before the mirror. Dim light reflects in the slightly warped bronze, showing you a woman of 23, pale skin, dry lips, eyes sunken from sleeplessness, a dazzling doll about to be placed on a chessboard. You hear the door open. A maid rushes in, breathless. "Your Majesty, the king invites you to dine with him tonight." You smile, half joy, half fear, because in the Tudor court, dinner with the king could mean you're spared, or it's your last meal before being charged. And this is just your first day as queen. Congratulations, you've survived until noon. Now, only the rest of your life remains, if you live long enough to call it a life. You sit in your study, holding a goblet of light wine that feels anything but warming, the only comfort being that today the king is busy hunting and hasn't summoned you to his private chamber. A rare moment to yourself, to ponder your fragile existence. Beneath the floral embroidered lace of your Tudor gown lies a cold truth. You're not the first woman to sit in this position, nor the first to wonder if you'll last until next spring. Before you, there were 5, 6, if you count the young lady who died miscarrying in her first year of marriage. A quiet fault of fate, the court called it. You call it a death knell. Let's review. Catherine of Aragon, the first queen, a Spanish princess, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, royal blood, so thick the Vatican kissed her hand. She was steadfast, intelligent, devoted, devout to her core. Yet the king redefined their relationship, specifically cast her out, declared her never his legal wife, and left her to die alone in a windswept castle in Kimbolton, childless, powerless, crownless. And that was the best outcome among the 6 wives. Next was Anne Boleyn, or as the people whispered, the 6-fingered witch who dared glare at the king and make him wait. Anne wasn't just clever, she was captivating, the kind to make a king forsake a church to marry her. But that was the problem. When you drive a man to madness for you, he'll hate you for it. Anne was charged with incest, adultery, treason, all in 1 week, beheaded in silence, her body not even buried in a royal graveyard. Bad girl? No, just a girl who no longer pleased the king. Then came Jane Seymour, deemed the wife the king loved most. She was good, very good, stood straight, smiled on cue, didn't argue, had no opinions, and so she wasn't executed. She died of hemorrhage after birthing Edward. The king mourned her for 3 days, then married again. Good girls live longer, maybe, but only by a few months. Anne of Cleves, the queen beautiful in paint, less so in person. The king saw her once and said, "I cannot be her husband," and so they divorced. Her luck? She didn't love anyone, didn't foolishly act too clever or too dim. She simply existed, nodded, signed the divorce papers, and got a castle to live out her days. Survived by, failing quickly, Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn's cousin, youthful, vibrant, and sadly, honest. Too honest. She had a lover before marrying the king. Mistake. Worse, she met him again after. So, head rolled, blood spilled, once more at the Tower of London. When led away, she asked to rehearse placing her head on the block before execution day. Charming, likable, dead. And finally, Catherine Parr, the survivor, older than the king, educated. Instead of seducing him, she did something smarter, read the Bible with him. When accused of heresy, she threw herself at Henry's feet, weeping, begging to learn from his wisdom, rather than teach him with books. Result, she lived. Yes, lived, and even remarried her old lover after the king died. But survival didn't mean unscathed. She endured years of stress, miscarriages, and died of infection after her first childbirth at 36. Starting to see the pattern. There is no pattern. Bad girls die. Good girls die. Just right girls live quietly. The issue isn't who you are, it's what you are to the king that month. Joy, symbol, duty, or a reminder of another failed marriage. When you become something that tires him, whether you sang to him nightly or prayed 5 times a day, it won't stop him from signing your death warrant. In the Tudor court, you're not a wife. You're a role, a temporary character, a symbol that must know when to exit the stage or risk being dragged off by a sword. And if you think being obedient, compliant, enduring is enough, sorry. The blood on the cold stones of the tower doesn't care if you're a good girl. It only knows you're a queen and no longer needed. So, remember, in the Tudor court, survival isn't about being good. It's about knowing when to vanish, or at least ensuring the king doesn't notice you're still there. You sit there, on a velvet cushioned chair beside a dining table, long as an execution platform, your hand trembling slightly as you lift a silver spoon to scoop soggy oatmeal, laced with rosewater and disappointment. Morning sunlight streams through stained glass, glinting off the gold-embroidered gowns of the ladies around you. But it doesn't ease the chill creeping down your spine. A chill, not from the weather, but from probing eyes. This is a palace breakfast, but don't be fooled by the scent of baked bread or the lute's tune. This is where you're measured with every breath. To your left sits Lady Norfolk, eyes locked on you, as if one wrong fork could prompt her to report a sign of heresy to the Archbishop. To your right, the Countess of Suffolk smiles, peels an apple, and wonders if her husband could marry you once the king tires of you. You bite into bread, forcing your mouth to chew as if all's well, but your mind is navigating a minefield. Which hand for the napkin? Should you laugh at the Earl's deer-hunting tale? And most crucially, who is the king looking at? Because his glance could be a lifeline or an indictment. Every woman in this room is a draft of you, or a future version. Some were once close to the previous queen, until accused of secretly messaging a knight. Some were once called morning's light by the king, now relegated to the table's end, in old dresses, unnamed. And you, today, still sit near the table's head, still served wine first, still blessed with God's grace when you sneeze, but all that could vanish with one royal frown. This breakfast isn't for eating, it's a performance. You must seem just obedient enough, just cheerful enough, just clever enough, without threatening, just holy enough, without being dull. You can't eat too much, lest they call you gluttonous, can't eat too little, lest they whisper you're pregnant, or plotting. You can't spill wine, as it's an ill omen, and you certainly can't linger too long on a male courtier, even if he's just a servant carrying bread. You look up, try to smile at the Dowager Queen, the only woman in the room with the right to see you as a caterpillar. She doesn't smile back. She just slices her bread with a silver knife, etched with the York crest, as if reminding you she was here before all these daughters-in-law sprouted like poisonous mushrooms. The king enters. Everyone rises, as if a cold wind swept through. You smile, eyes forward, but soft, head bowed at the right angle, hands positioned correctly. One wrong beat, one misplaced breath, and you'll be listed for further observation. The king doesn't greet you. He strides to his chair, sits, and asks, "Who baked this bread?" The room holds its breath. The head cook, hiding behind a door, might be praying or drafting her will. The king takes a bite, frowns. Good. The table exhales. Just a loaf, but it saved at least 3 lives. You smile faintly, sip wine mixed with orange blossom, and wonder if you're eating breakfast or executing a covert mission in enemy territory. Conversation begins, but you know no word is harmless. When Lady Seymour asks about your reading, you tread carefully. Say yes, and you're ambitious. Say no, and you're dim. So you choose neutrality. I greatly enjoy the Archbishop's sermons. A safe answer, not too intellectual, not too foolish, and aligned with the court's orthodox faith. The king doesn't look at you, but he hears. That's the slim hope you cling to in this trap-filled feast. Breakfast ends. The king rises. Everyone bows in unison, and your heart skips a beat as he turns. But no, he walks out. No glance, no farewell, just an empty chair and dagger-like eyes flicking toward you. You weren't noticed by the king. That's good and bad, because in the Tudor court, being noticed means being used. Not being noticed means it's time to be replaced. And you sit among those women, silver spoon in hand, dread in heart, knowing tomorrow this performance repeats, again and again, until your role is rewritten or erased from the play. Being a Tudor queen can stop your heart for many reasons: fear, hunger, poison, or loving at the wrong time. If you still think Love with the King is like an old ballad, full of roses, candles, and embraces in the rain, be warned, you're playing with fire in a palace of wood. Henry VIII is the kind of man who, if you tilt your head wrong during a dance, might feel insulted and fire you from married life. And, if he loves you too much, worse. When love in court isn't paired with politics, it's treason. Think love is a weapon? No, here, it's kindling. Remember Anne Boleyn, the woman who made the king change a religion, defy the pope, and plunge a kingdom into decades of crisis, for loving her, obsessing over her, adoring her, until the flame cooled, and he started seeing she talked too much, was too clever, looked witchy. He beheaded her without much thought. That's what happens when you love before he loves you back. And if you love after he stopped, your love is like a letter sent to the wrong courtroom. Everything you say, every glance you give, every word you utter can be used as evidence against you in a trial where you don't pick your lawyer. Even if you love only the king, like Catherine Howard, young, bright, and not cautious enough to hide old memories. A letter found in a drawer, a maid saying she smiled at Thomas Culpeper too long, and the game's over. Led through the tower's cold walls, where wind whistles through bars like whispers of queens before you. And you know their pain wasn't the axe. It was that love, meant to be the last comfort in a deceit-filled court, led them to the scaffold. You might try not to love, but you're human. When a gentle glance passes in a cold, long corridor, when a young servant leaves a dried rose in your Bible, when you hear poetry read in the garden at dusk, you'll feel something. Then you'll curse yourself for feeling. You'll tuck emotions into your handkerchief's folds. You'll tear poems, burn letters, avoid mirrors. But eyes can't be controlled. Your heart races when someone enters. A return smile keeps you awake, not from dreaming, but from fear someone saw. In the Tudor court, you don't have the right to love, only the duty to be loved. And being loved is a fragile asset, like an expensive porcelain vase, displayed when guests visit, but tossed downstairs when the owner's bored. Loved too early, you're suspected of scheming. Loved too late, you're replaced. Loved just right, you must keep that love alive through every tantrum, over a lost falcon at a hunt. But worst is when you truly love, when your heart falls into someone's hands, a musician, a courtier, even a cleric. Because here, loving anyone but the king is an act against the crown. You're sleeping with the nation, and the nation doesn't forgive. Buried in court records are stories, queens whose names aren't spoken, nobles hanged without fanfare for improper communication with a crowned woman. Even sighing over a love poem could be evidence of emotional wavering beyond the crown. In a system where feelings are contraband, you, a woman expected to bear children, stay beautiful, keep decorum, pray, smile, aren't allowed a heart, or must hide it better than gold in the royal vault. To live past a season of roses, learn to love like a shadow, silent, traceless, leaving no scent on pillows, no memory in anyone's eyes. You can pray, you can write a diary, but burn it nightly. You can hold a glance, a word, a touch in your heart, but never show it on your face. In the Tudor court, love is the one crime, needing no clear evidence to convict. And if you've never loved, congratulations, you're the ideal queen, not because you're pure, but because you're alive. But one day, if someone bows to you with eyes saying more than protocol allows, if your heart skips a beat, remember, every love story here is a sentence counting down, and you're the last to hear the bell. Take a deep breath, because tonight, you're no longer yourself. You've just officially become the wife of King Henry VIII, the anointed of God, the bearer of the scepter, and also the man with a habit of cutting off his ex-wives' heads when he's bored. Congratulations, you've just stepped into one of Europe's grandest palaces, Hampton Court, and condolences, because you've also stepped into a gilded trap. Your room is vast, the ceiling is high, the walls are draped in silk, and as cold as the heart of the king who left after the wedding to sleep in another chamber. It's not that you're not beautiful enough, not that you're not virtuous enough. It's just that he's weighing whether to keep loving you or not, and that's always a shaky signal for your delicate neck. You step down from the royal bed, your feet touching a Persian embroidered rug, soft but cold. Your hand brushes the silk shawl around your shoulders, woven in Venice, dyed in Florence, now soaked with your sweat of fear. On the table, a jug of red wine remains from last night's feast. Beside it, an ivory comb that two maids are arguing over whether to style your hair in the Spanish or French fashion. You sit, nodding out of habit. No one asks your opinion, of course. You're the queen, not a person. Everything you do is a ritual, from breathing at the right pace, as you pass the chapel to smiling just enough at breakfast with the king. Every blink could be interpreted as rebellion, or worse, not charming enough. Outside the window, morning mist drapes the Tudor garden, where roses are planted in the shape of a cross. You gaze at them, wondering if one day your head might be buried beneath. A soft female voice speaks. Your Majesty, your attire is ready. You nod, stand, and let three women begin the 30-minute dressing process. Not because you have so much to wear, but because each layer feels like a chain. First, a linen chemise, then a corset, so tight you forget where your lungs are. Next, the petticoat, the main gown, the bodice, the belt, earrings, lace collar, and finally a cloak heavier than a dungeon wall. When it's done, you're no longer a person but a walking statue, a display piece for the dynasty. You're led to the breakfast hall, where the king isn't present. For the third time in a row, one of his attendants bows, apologizing on his behalf, saying the king has state matters. You don't ask. You're not allowed to. Deep down you know, state matters often means a blonde maid being attended privately in his study. You pick up a silver spoon, sip cold oatmeal, and remember you ate better as a commoner. But back then, you weren't the target of plots, living among people who smile at you and are ready to accuse you of treason if you accidentally frown when the king tells a bad joke. A bell rings, morning prayers. You stand, walk solemnly to the chapel. A maid adjusts the crown on your head, whispering, "The archbishop is here today." You understand today, you must be especially devout. For God, for the court, and most importantly, for your life, you pray, but not for faith. You pray the king won't change his mind, that he won't think you're too cold, or too clever, or too much like the wife he had beheaded. After the service, you return to your room, sit before the mirror. Dim light reflects in the slightly warped bronze, showing you, a woman of 23, pale skin, dry lips, eyes sunken from sleeplessness, a dazzling doll about to be placed on a chessboard. You hear the door open. A maid rushes in, breathless. "Your Majesty, the king invites you to dine with him tonight." You smile, half joy, half fear, because in the Tudor court, dinner with the king could mean you're spared, or it's your last meal before being charged. And this is just your first day as queen. Congratulations, you've survived until noon. Now, only the rest of your life remains, if you live long enough to call it a life. You sit motionless before the slightly convex bronze mirror, where the reflection isn't you but a stretched, painted, blurred and distorted version, crafted to the aesthetic standards of a court where beautiful means fake. Behind you stand three maids, each holding a different tool, a horn comb, a powder puff, a silver spoon with a mixture of white powder that looks like flour but is toxic enough to kill a mouse with one sip. Every morning begins with the ritual of turning you into a statue fit to stand beside the king, skin pale as old paper, forehead high as a chessboard, lips pink as anemic blood, and eyes wide and innocent, as if you've never seen a beheading for wearing the wrong shade of rouge. You think you'll be pampered, relaxed, slathered with lotion. No, the Tudor Queen's dressing room isn't a spa. It's a small laboratory where beauty and poison mate daily on your face. Step 1. Shave your eyebrows, because thick brows are seen as a sign of intelligence, and that scares people. Then, a layer of fine white powder coats your entire face. Did you know it's made from lead? They believe it gives you noble whiteness. The truth? It flakes your skin, thins your hair, cracks your face, and eventually whitens you to death. But if you don't apply it, your skin isn't bright enough to reflect candlelight at a banquet, and standing next to other ladies, each molded like porcelain, you'll look more like a servant than a queen. Then comes the lipstick, made from cinnabar or iron oxide, materials used to dye cloth or craft weapons, sometimes mixed with honey to last longer, meaning it clings to your lips even when you try to wash it off with tears. Your eyes, lined with charcoal mixed with vinegar and egg yolk. It smells, it's heavy, and it stings so much you must blink in rhythm to avoid looking like you're crying from regret. Every time you rub your eyes, you tell yourself, no, reapplying takes too long, and you know, if the line's uneven, someone will laugh, and that laughter will be recounted in at least 3 private meetings among the noble women. Your hair can't be its natural color. Brown is deemed lacking divine light. Black raises suspicions of witchcraft. Red resembles Anne Boleyn, and you want nothing to remind anyone of her, so you dye it by boiling urine with sulfur and washing your hair in it. 40 minutes. The smell, indescribable. Let's just say even the royal cats won't come near you afterward, but it gives your hair a faint, dull gold sheen under candlelight, just enough to be praised as March sunshine. And that matters, because here, March sunshine can save your life. Your hands are soaked in goat's milk mixed with vinegar to soften the skin, then smeared with wet oatmeal to reduce roughness. Don't think it's pleasant. When you sit still for 3 hours daily in a cold room, slathered with powder, wrapped in cloth, coated with toxins, sprayed with perfume made from pine resin and ambergris secreted from a whale's gut, you understand, beauty in the Tudor court isn't a privilege, it's a duty, and it hurts. But you do it, because one day with dry skin, pale lips, puffy eyes, flat hair, and someone will whisper you're no longer loved by the king. From then on, everything you do is scrutinized. Skip prayers, treason, pray too much, hypocrisy, wear emerald green, evoking the former queen, wear grey, signaling gloom in the court. Do you get it? Beauty here is a political game. You can't win, only survive. And no matter how hard you try, the lead on your face will crack, your eyes will darken, your hands will spot, your mouth will dry like the king's vows after the honeymoon. Then, new girls appear, smooth faces, bright eyes, unsmudged lips, hair that doesn't fall out. And you sit before the mirror, letting maids cover your freckles with toxic white powder, wondering, am I dressing up to be queen, or to hide that I'm already rotting? But you sit there, you apply, you smile, because in the Tudor court, every morning you're still made up is a morning you still have your head, and you learn surviving isn't about being truly beautiful. It's about hiding your decay well enough. The mirror doesn't lie, that in this court, telling the truth is the fastest way to lose your tongue or your head. So you sit still and let them keep painting, keep shaping, keep turning you into the most beautiful thing fear can create. You sit there, on the consort's throne beside the golden one, hands lightly resting on the gold-embroidered velvet gown, head bearing a crown heavy as a diamond-encrusted curse, and to the world, you're the second most powerful person in the kingdom. But let me remind you of something. Every Tudor queen, who lasted more than a year, knows your power isn't real. It's like the gown you wear, lavish, dazzling, and not truly yours. It's borrowed, and it can be taken back at any moment, without warning. You think you're respected? Look back at this morning's court session, where you sat less than an arm's length from the king, but weren't allowed to speak, to comment, to ask a single word. You're a symbol, not a being. You're paraded at feasts, mentioned in songs praising the king, but no one asks what you think. And if you dare reveal your thinking, death awaits. Every letter you write is reread. Every whisper to a maid could be quoted verbatim in secret meetings among noblemen. Every step you take, whether to church or a garden stroll, is noted, monitored, and if needed, twisted into signs of the Queen's unrest. Want to aid a poor monastery? Careful, you'll be accused of Catholic extremism. Want to suggest sparing an innocent's execution? Sorry, meddling in justice is overstepping. Want to protect a falsely accused maid? Watch out, they'll say you're shielding sin to protect allies. See the paradox? You can't command, yet you're blamed as if you did. You can't act, yet you bear the consequences of action, all because you're the queen, a shiny, hollow title. Think you can influence the king? Sorry, the king listens to whomever he wants. Today it's you, tomorrow it's the advisor who gifted him a new falcon, or the high-voiced girl fresh from Wales. You might think you swayed him in a private meeting, but the next day, a decree comes out completely opposite, and the only name mentioned is yours. Why? Because you were too familiar, because you influenced, because you bewitched His Majesty. And if that makes courtiers feel threatened, condolences. You're now on the list of women, disrupting the nation's order. Anne Boleyn once believed she had power. She told courtiers, I am the mother of the future. Then she bore a girl, miscarried a second time. And those who once kissed her hem began whispering, the queen is demon-possessed. Her power fell not because she failed, but because those around her stopped pretending she was fearsome. You can master every etiquette book. You can host flawless festivals, perform rituals perfectly, pray 10 times a day, and never laugh too loudly at dinner. But one ill-timed rumor, one misinterpreted glance, one enemy yawning as you pass, and you're labeled scheming, or ignorant, or both. Your crime will never be clearly defined. It'll come as an innocent question from some earl. The queen's been absent lately, hasn't she? Or a vague poem found in your maid's drawer, or an evening when the king doesn't invite you to dine, and the next morning, rumors say you're unwell, a polite way of saying out of the power cycle. Real power in the court isn't in the throne, it's in the corridors, in midnight whispers among advisors, in ledgers you'll never touch, in unwritten rules everyone must know. The more you use reason to survive, the more dangerous you seem. The more you retreat, the more you're scorned. The more cautious you are, the colder they call you. The more gentle, the duller they deem you. In a world where women are either dolls or witches, you must play politician with silent language. You nod at the right time, smile just enough, place your hand on your chest when the prince's name is mentioned. Forget who you are to keep being someone's wife. And in the end, if you survive, they'll say, she was clever. But you know it's not, because you were clever. It's because you learned the costliest lesson here. A Tudor queen's power isn't in her hands. It's in making others think you have nothing in them. It's an illusion, and if you perform it well enough, you might live in it. For a while, until the king looks elsewhere, or until the illusion shatters with your neck. You sit in your small study, dim candlelight, illuminating the page of an old copy of Sermons on Faith and Virtue, a book you had to request permission for 3 times to hold without suspicion. Your eyes scan the Latin lines, your mind struggling to memorize, careful not to mark the margins, because you know in the Tudor court, if you're a woman who reads, you're one step too close to witch. Sounds absurd. Not here. This is a dynasty where female knowledge is seen as dynamite, and you're the fuse. You speak French? Suspicious. Read the Bible in its original translation. Heresy. Quote Augustine at dinner. Instantly labeled, invoking divine authority. Just say, I think justice deserves closer examination, and some marquis will slam his goblet down, face pale as if he's seen a demon. Women aren't supposed to think, unless they're thinking of warming their husband's bed. And you, Queen of England, are expected to be a vase that says, Amen, not a scholar who writes poetry. But the trouble is, you're intelligent. You were educated from childhood. You know the court is a maze, and words are your only map. Just don't let anyone know. Here, reading at night is suspicious. Keeping a diary is dubious. Knowing too many names in the royal genealogy is unnaturally sharp memory. Want to say something clever? Let a male courtier say it first, then clap softly. Want to quote scripture? Let the priest go first, then repeat in a sweet voice. Every sign of female knowledge must be translated into docility, because if not, they'll start examining you like mold on a wedding cake, quietly, but it spreads fast. First come the rumors that you enjoy solitude, that a servant saw candlelight in your study unusually late, that you ask too much about pregnancy tonics, or worse, your hair is falling out in clumps, undeniable proof of sorcery. Then, one morning, you wake to find no one greeting you at breakfast. No one meets your eyes. An old servant whispers they're quitting, due to unease around your room's aura. A bishop comes to inspect your books. A young male servant is caught rifling through your desk drawers, and no one questions who sent him. From then on, every step is a religious test. Smile too little, you're plotting. Smile too much, you're seducing demons. Mention astronomy, you're practicing astrology. Know the difference between anise and hemlock, you're brewing poison for the king. And if suffocated, you write a sad poem lamenting a woman's caged life in the palace. Congratulations, you've just confessed to being led by the devil. You might think your crown, your status, protects you. No, Anne Boleyn wore a heavier crown than yours, and the last thing she wore before the scaffold was a blindfold. She was called a witch, official charge, bewitching the king with mystical means. No one asked, where's the proof? They only asked, are there rumors? And in this court, rumors have souls. Think only villagers get tied to wooden chairs and thrown into rivers to test if they float. Wrong. In court, you're thrown into a different river. Political whispers. If you float, you're a rebel. If you sink, you're forgotten. Worst of all, you can't pull out. The more you prove your innocence, the guiltier you seem. One day, you're invited to pray privately with the archbishop, and he'll say in a mournful tone, people are concerned for your soul. That's not advice. It's a signal. Clear your study, burn your poems, hide your books, cut back on solitary hours, invite simple women to lunch, talk more about fashion, less about philosophy. And if you must read, do it in your head. Or better, stop reading. Memorize what you need. Turn your intelligence into instinct, like a fox learning to run silently at the sound of footsteps. Because here, intelligence is an unnamed sin, and a learned woman is a cursed one. You don't need to do anything wrong. Just live right, read right, remember right, and you'll be framed, marked, named in meetings you're not invited to. And eventually, you'll be asked, do you truly believe you know better than God? And by then, whether you say no or yes, the blade's already sharpened. So, if you want to live, act dumb, pretend you've never read, hide your mind deep in your gown's third seam, under the silk lining, and when they ask what you're thinking, smile, and say, I'm wondering what pairs best with rose jelly. That's a harmless answer, and sometimes, harmless is the only way to keep your head. They enter your room each morning, with gentle smiles, lifting their skirts, voices soft as chapel whispers, and you think, these are the only people I can trust in this maze. Wrong. These are the only ones who see you not from afar, but from behind. The Queen's maids aren't friends, allies, or family. They're eyes, tongues, hands hired to straighten your gown and report immediately that you're sitting a bit listlessly. How many servants do you have? Many. And how many are loyal? Not even one, perhaps. Some were sent by your mother-in-law, some recommended by court advisors, some served the previous queen and still call you by her name. Worse, some are the king's direct spies. You don't know who's who, and you don't have time to investigate, because when you breathe, they note your rhythm. When you dream, they check if you talk in your sleep. When you write a letter, they count the lines, measure the ink, and if you use a new perfume, they whisper that the queen's trying to seem more alluring than usual. In the dressing room, they brush your hair together, but their eyes dart to each other, lips curling just enough for you to sense something you're not privy to. They comb your hair, pin jewels to your head, kneel to fasten your shoes, then leave the room and head straight to another, where they recount to some duchess that the queen seems less ardent toward his majesty. That's how betrayal happens. Light, sweet, soft as silk, and deadlier than an axe by far. Sometimes you think you've found a trustworthy one, a young, shy, quiet girl who brings tea on time and knows when to slip away silently. You trust her. You tell her about a nightmare, about your fear for the king's health, and 2 days later, the Earl of Norfolk asks at dinner, Your Majesty, did you sleep well last night? His eyes don't show concern. They probe to see if you know who spoke. You smile, sip tea, and realize none of them are yours. You can't dismiss them, can't choose anew. Each maid is a piece in the power game, carefully placed to watch you and to wait. Some just want to survive, some want to climb, some want to replace you. Don't forget, Anne Boleyn was once Catherine of Aragon's maid, and you know how Anne ended, but you also know, before her head fell, she wore the crown. Maids don't just brush the queen's hair, they're next in line, if the king looks at them long enough. So when you see one wearing a new dress, smiling more than usual, humming softly while sweeping, you worry, because you know in this palace, no one sings for joy. They sing when something's about to change or die. Jealousy is unavoidable. So, a younger girl, smoother face, brighter smile, and you, drinking tonics each morning to keep your skin from cracking under lead, sitting at a feast without a single glance from the king, feel a sting in your chest. You don't want to be jealous, but you're human, and the maids know it. They nudge, drop a line. His Majesty said, that color doesn't suit you. Then they laugh and turn away, leaving you with a small flame, enough to burn your night. Worse is when they play dirty. Steep. You've heard of a pretty little maid who slipped nettle into a queen's tea, making her vomit for 2 days and sparking rumors of an unwanted pregnancy. It was never investigated, because no one believes a maid does wrong, but everyone believes a queen can lose control. Another time, a long hair was found in Queen Catherine Howard's porridge. No one confessed, but a week later, a new maid replaced the one deemed careless. Who was the new one? A duchess's niece, whom the king had danced with 3 times in a row. Starting to see the game, nothing is chance. Every cup of tea, every hairpin, every gown chosen, because it flatters your figure, could be a test, a message, or a velvet-sheathed dagger. You can't get angry, can't confront, only smile, and let them keep serving you, keep watching you, and wait for a mistake, so you learn to play the part, memorize each one's name, habits, perfume, footsteps. You praise at the right moment, pretend not to know, write your diary in code, Instruct your closest maid to sip your water first, every time, and though your heart's uneasy, you let them pin up your hair each morning with a sharp hairpin that could pierce their throat if you wished. But you don't, because in this sisterhood of maids, the first to strike is often the next to lose her head, and you, the queen, are still alive today, still smiling, still letting them brush your hair, still hearing the rustle of silk gowns behind you, meaning you're still winning, at least until tonight. They enter your room as night falls, the oil lamps freshly lit, candlelight flickering on the walls like ghosts watching your fate, and one of them, always the quietest, never meeting your eyes, leans forward and says the words every Tudor queen both dreads and longs for. His Majesty summons you to his chamber. There's no question mark, no choice, no if your Majesty is free, just a command dressed in politeness. You nod, not too fast, not too slow, a nod that says you're both honored and summoned to a chessboard where you'll never hold a piece. The maids hurriedly dress you in a sheer cream silk gown embroidered with silver thread, the neckline cut low enough to avoid impropriety, but still evoke a goddess. They sprinkle frankincense powder in your hair, dab a few drops of lavender and sandalwood perfume on your wrists. Not too much, just enough for the king to think you're naturally alluring. You can't wear heavy makeup. The king hates artifice. But if you show your bare face, he'll call you lifeless. So you rouge your cheeks with red wine and pinch them to flush. Everything you do has one purpose, to please a man who can sign your death warrant with an unshaking hand. The corridor to the king's chamber feels longer tonight, though it's the same old stone path, your footsteps echoing like an oath. The maid leading the way says nothing, neither do you. You're busy regulating your breath, mentally rehearsing the safest answers to any question he might throw. Did you find this morning's prayers chilly? No, sire. Thanks be to God. Did you like yesterday's meat pie? Delicious, sire. You truly blessed the kitchen. Are you aware the Earl of Northumberland stared at you longer than is proper? No, sire. I've never looked at him more than once. And if he asks nothing, just watches you as if measuring the depth of your loyalty with his eyes. You'll bow your head just enough to seem fragile, but not surrendered. The heavy oak door opens, its hinges creaking like metal grazing fate. The king sits by the fireplace, clad in a deep red robe, holding a goblet, his face expressionless. You kneel on one knee, bow your head, and rise when signaled. The room isn't as grand as the banquet hall, but far more stifling. The air thickens with tension, unspoken demands, and expectations from a man used to getting whatever he wants. Come here, he says. You step forward. He tells you to sit. You sit. He asks what you thought of this morning's sermon. You praise the archbishop. He nods. He says you look thinner. You smile. The smile of someone carrying a raw egg on a silver spoon, trying not to drop it. He stands, steps closer, takes your hand. That hand signed his last wife's execution order. It's also the hand that gave you a wedding ring, touched your cheek one sunny afternoon, promising to protect you forever. You don't mention that promise anymore. No one lives long in this court believing in promises. He kisses you, lightly, then harder. No music, no scented candles, just duty. You can't seem bored, nor too eager. Every expression risks misinterpretation, being remembered, being recounted with commentary. Then he sleeps, instantly, as if he's just fulfilled a duty or crossed off a task. You lie still, not daring to turn. Then you rise quietly, reclaim your robe, open the door. The maid waits outside. She asks nothing. She doesn't need to. By morning, the court will know you were summoned tonight, and the questions will start. Is the Queen still holding His Majesty's interest? Did he stay the whole night? Has she been called often lately? All aimed at one thing, measuring the pulse of his favor, because if that pulse stops, so do you. Back in your room, you change, wipe off your lipstick, wash the blush from your cheeks, and look in the mirror. Anything different? No, still you, but no one sees you anymore. They see the role you just played, and the next time you're called, it might be to his bed, or to hear an indictment, or for the last time. But you'll go, because you can't refuse. Never. In the Tudor court, refusing the king is refusing to live. And you, though weary, though scared, still want to live one more night, just one more. Then you'll see. You realize it not in a heated debate or a earth-shattering quarrel. No, it happens quietly, like a pillow slowly gutted of its stuffing, until you hold it but have nothing left to lean on. One morning, you enter the banquet hall, and no one stands. One noon, you eat alone because the king is in council. One evening, the gatekeeper says, His Majesty is resting, and the door closes softly, like a pitying headshake. You're still the queen, the crown still there, your gown still pressed, maids still dressing you each morning, but everything around you has shifted. Like an orchestra you no longer hear the beat of. Eyes that once bowed as you passed, now whisper behind your back. Gifts once sent to your room now go to a maid with a sweet voice, big eyes, and a straight back. You notice the king no longer looks at you as before, nor bothers to hide it. His indifference isn't fiery like flame or freezing like ice. It's numbing, like an anesthetic, making you wonder, did I do something wrong? You replay every detail. Did I forget to bow deeply enough at prayers? Did I talk too much about books? Is my hair less glossy? Or is it simply that you're still here, and he's moved on? You try smiling more, wear the color he once praised, hire musicians to play his favorite tune, but he doesn't notice, and when you smile, others look at you like you're clinging to something long gone. In the Tudor court, when the king stops loving you, you're not immediately dragged to the scaffold. First, you're forgotten, then ignored, then questioned. Those who greeted you now find reasons to be absent. Meetings exclude you. Hunting trips don't invite you. You hear new names. She's so agreeable. She doesn't lecture on morals all day. She makes the king laugh. Each word pricks your pride, and you can't respond, because reacting weakens you. You know that new maid won't take your throne. Not yet, but she'll sit in the king's heart, and that's the throne that matters. You try writing to the king. Gentle, polite, decorum-filled. No reply. You wait outside his study, but a servant says he's out, though you saw his crimson robe slip behind a curtain. You can't command, can't reproach, can't speak truth. You can only keep appearing, on time, in place, in role, and hope. But while you hope, they've started counting down. One earl tells another, that position needs someone steadier. A duchess remarks, I hear she's been having nightmares. A priest visits your room to pray for your mental health. You never said you were unwell, but the more you deny, the more they're convinced. And the king stays silent. His silence is passive consent to everything being prepared behind your back. Sometimes you see him laugh with another, a laugh you thought was yours alone. Sometimes he calls you by the wrong name, or stops calling your name. You're her, madam, the queen, no longer the one he whispered to at midnight. You start losing sleep, and you can't afford to, because dark circles are signs of collapse. You eat less, and you can't afford to thin, because that's shirking the duty to bear children. You purse your lips, stand tall, keep your voice even, and they call you cold, distant, arrogant. You cry silently, buried in blankets, asking God why, and they call you weak, emotional, unhinged. You can't be right, you can only exist, and exist by staying silent, holding your place, trying not to collapse before someone else tries on your gown. But you know that day is coming, because when the king stops loving you, you're no longer truly queen. You're outdated decor, in a room of power that's changed style, and they don't fix decor, they replace it. History doesn't record the moment you're officially cast aside, it only notes the day your successor steps in, and you're left with a name on a portrait, hung in the back, in a corridor, few pass through. And if someone asks, what happens when a queen is no longer loved? The answer is, nothing happens. Everything just slips away, and you're still there, and that sometimes is crueler than a blade. She helps you dress each morning, lifts your gown as you step down cold stone stairs, brushes your hair with fingers so gentle you think you're cherished. But really, she's counting your size per day. She's not a spy from some thrilling tale with a black cloak and coded signals. No, she's just one of many Tudor court servants, trained to watch, remember, and whisper at the right time. Every time you open your study door, someone knows. Every letter you receive, someone notes. Every frown at a meal, just a small crease between your brows. By the next day, there's a rumor. The queen's displeased with the food, and by noon, your cook's reassigned to the cellar. Think your servants are loyal? They're loyal only to what keeps them alive longer. And if that's reporting to the Earl of Norfolk that you cried last night after the king skipped your room, they'll tell, not out of malice, just naturally. Because in the Tudor court, loyalty is a commodity, traded for favors, better food, or simply another winter's stay. One of your longest-serving maids served the previous queen. She never speaks of the past, but when you enter the chapel, her eyes always lower slightly, as if seeing a shadow you don't know. Once you asked her what color the former queen liked, she smiled faintly and changed the subject. That's a warning. No one talks about the past here, because those who do don't have a future. But you know your servants are the bridge between you and a world you can't control. They hear footsteps, see glances, know who enters your room, and who needs that information. One maid brings you pastries every afternoon, soft, fragrant, just sweet. But one day, the pastry's salty, very salty. You say nothing, but another maid notices, and the next day, there's a rumor that the queen's losing her taste, a sign of pregnancy or poisoning. The story spreads to 3 rooms: the kitchen, the sewing chamber, the library. By the 4th day, the archbishop visits concerned for your health. You realize servants don't need to slander you. They just need to not tell the full truth. Just say, she's been sleeping a lot lately, or she walked unusually fast, or she sighed at the Duke of Kent's name. That's enough to stir trouble, because in the Tudor court, no one needs proof to act, just a feeling. And the ones creating that feeling are the ones who change your shoes, wash your linens, bring your tea. Worse, some don't just watch you, they're planted to make you talk. They ask about your dreams, your feelings, if you miss your mother. An innocent question, but if you answer, yes, I wish I could visit her, the next day there's a report. The queen feels isolated, possibly not fully loyal to the court. You can't escape, because even if you lock your door, the floor sweeper enters each morning. Even if you write your diary in Old French, a maid can read a little. Even if you burn every letter, the ashes leave traces. And if you slip to the garden at dawn to watch the sunrise, you'll hear footsteps behind you, a maid passing by. Nothing is by chance. Everything is recorded. Once you told your closest maid your back ached. A trivial comment. 3 days later, liver tonic arrives from the apothecary. 7 days later, the Earl of Hereford gifts you a saint-embroidered cushion. 10 days later, the king asks at dinner, "Are you weary lately?" You look around. No one's laughing, but you know, every word you speak has been poured into the right ears at the right time. And if you're truly ill, you won't dare say, because honesty is more dangerous than hiding sickness. You might be seen as weak, or secretly pregnant, or concealing a contagion. All are crimes. So you learn to stay silent, smile just enough, speak just enough, say only what everyone knows, answer questions no one cares about, and if you must confide, you talk to the saint's statue in the chapel, where only God might hear, if he's listening. Meanwhile, your servants keep pouring tea, tying ribbons, braiding hair, keep calling you your majesty, keep bowing, keep speaking in the softest tones, but you know, behind every my lady, there might be a report written in someone's diary, a small note sent to a powerful lord. And the price for a wrong word isn't a reprimand, it's a day when someone knocks, saying, "Please pack your things," and you'll be led away, not knowing who betrayed you, why, or who last heard you speak something true. Only that someone heard, and that's enough. You kneel in the ornate chapel of Hampton Court, head bowed low, hands clasped so tightly your nails dig into your skin, and as the scent of frankincense swirls around you like sacred mist, your mind isn't on heaven but on something very earthly. Should you pray Catholic or Anglican today to keep your head tomorrow? It's not about faith, it's about survival. Because, in the Tudor court, religion isn't a personal choice, it's a battlefield, a faction. And you, the queen, are the center of all suspicion, scrutiny, and unspoken expectations. A slightly too traditional sign of the cross could be seen as covert Roman allegiance. A prayer too simple might be disrespecting ritual. Pray too loudly, you're ostentatious. Too softly, you lack faith. Wear the wrong color to a saint's feast. Heresy. Kneel too long, suspected of atoning for treason. You don't have the right to believe in God your way. You only have the right to perform a politicized faith, so warped it's no longer a spiritual refuge, but a test of loyalty. Henry VIII was once defender of the faith, protector of Catholicism, until the Pope refused his divorce. So he broke England from Rome, founded the Church of England, with himself as supreme head, meaning anyone opposing him isn't just committing a political crime, but offending God. It also means, if you don't believe as he does, you're a heretic. If you believe as he does today, and he changes his mind tomorrow, you're still a heretic. And heretics are burned, or beheaded, or locked in the tower, until you weep blood, begging to die. The wives before you walked this tightrope between God and king. Catherine of Aragon, devout, refusing divorce, stripped of her title, exiled to a windy castle alone. Anne Boleyn, crowned through reform, beheaded for betrayal. Jane Seymour, died still saintly. Catherine Parr, nearly executed, for keeping banned books but survived by crying at the right time and quoting scripture like a seasoned manipulator. And you must navigate their ghosts daily, trying to hold faith without it becoming an indictment. You can't say aloud, sometimes you feel God's been silent too long, that you miss the old way of crossing yourself, that you still keep the rosary your mother gave you when you left home. You can't admit that some nights you dream of kneeling in an empty church with no one but a faceless priest, because they'd say you're obsessed with the Pope. And you know, obsession isn't an illness here, it's a crime. Your maid whispers, your private chaplain seems to be watched. A new servant advises, you should read the Bible in the court-approved English version. An earl at dinner asks, I hear you frequent the chapel often, a fine example, but I also hear it's due to Spanish influence. His words are light as a feather, heavy as stone. You can't argue, can't correct, you can only smile, bow, and that night, burn your favorite book. Each morning, you choose your prayers like armor. You hold your hands lower than yesterday. You lift your head during hymns. You walk slowly into the chapel, as if each step weighs its consequences, because consequences can come from anywhere. A bishop, a loose-lipped maid, the king waking in a foul mood, wanting to purge the court. You pray to live, not to live in grace, but to live in the basic sense, still breathing, not led away, not listed among the guilty, soon not forced to choose between your oath to God and your vow to the king. But deep in your heart, you know one day the question will come, maybe not directly, maybe just a test, an invitation to a new church, a request to support a new court decree on rituals, a small demand to sign a document you haven't fully read, and if you refuse, they'll call you arrogant. If you agree, they'll say you've switched sides. If you stay silent, they'll brand you double-faced. See? In the Tudor court, religion isn't salvation, it's a maze, and you, the queen, are the rat seeking a way out, while the walls shift, and the chapel bell tolls like a countdown. You no longer know if you're kneeling to God or the throne. You only know that if you close your eyes too long, you might open them to find your head on a cold block. And God, whether there or not, can't stop a blade sharpened by those who smiled at you after the blessing. So you keep praying, not for faith, but for life. And in this world, that's miracle enough. Her name is known to all, Anne Boleyn, the woman who made a king shatter a church to marry her, only to sign her death warrant 6 years later. But you may not truly understand her, not realize that her image isn't just a portrait with lace collar and eyes half proud, half pleading, but a cold mirror reflecting your own fate. Because if you're living in the Tudor court, if you're a queen raised by favor, not politics, if you've made the king smile at dinner and sigh when leaving your room, if you've ever felt special, you're walking Anne's path, just not yet at its end. Anne wasn't a foolish woman. She was clever, sharp, knew when to speak and when to stay silent, when to refuse to stoke the king's desire, when to be soft as silk or hard as stone. She played the power game like an artist, and she won, for a time. She became queen after Catherine of Aragon was ousted, after Henry VIII defied the Pope, after a nation reeled from an unprecedented schism. For her, for the womb he believed would bear a prince. But that womb bore Elizabeth, a girl, a miscalculation, then 2 miscarriages, then another unformed fetus, and the love that burned a kingdom began to cool. Anne sensed it before anyone said it. She saw the king no longer looked at her as before, felt him pull his hand back sooner after each clasp, noticed him avoiding her room, dining instead with fresher, gentler, less argumentative ladies. Anne grew afraid, and fear, in the Tudor court, is the scent of blood flowing backward. She tried to reclaim her place, wore gowns in his favorite color, prayed publicly, rallied for the new religion, gave alms to the poor. She even knelt sobbing before the king one spring night, begging his trust. But he didn't embrace her as before. He said, You should rest. And then she was arrested. The charge, adultery, with 5 men, including her own brother. Do you think it was true? No one did. Even her interrogator couldn't meet her eyes when reading the accusation. But truth here doesn't need to be true. It just needs to be convenient. And Anne was no longer convenient. She was taken to the tower. The Queen's cell was draped in white cloth. There were flowers, silent guards. But you know, silence here is a funeral bell. Anne wrote a final letter to the king. She said she still loved him, that she had no regrets, that she prayed God forgive those who accused her. The letter went unanswered. On her execution day, she wore grey, fastened her dress with black lace, hair pinned high, not a strand loose. She walked to the scaffold with steady feet. She knelt unbound. She asked forgiveness for those who slandered her. She didn't curse the king, didn't weep, didn't rail, only said, "I was loved by the king once, and that is enough." Then she placed her head on the block. The executioner, brought from France for his clean work, raised the blade. She didn't see it. One stroke, head fell, blood flowed, her body wrapped in white cloth, placed in a rough wooden coffin. No funeral, no trumpets, no songs. She, once the center of the king's universe, vanished like a ghost erased from her own story. You hear this while you're still alive, still called the king's beloved, still able to choose your gown's color, your meals, your servants, but you understand every gesture of yours is compared to Anne. She read books like that too. She laughed loudly like that too. She had opinions too, and you start to shrink, speak less, write less, live less, because you know Anne was once you, and you're in the place that killed her. You hear footsteps in the corridors at night. Your letters go unanswered. Younger girls enter the court. The king no longer asks if you're cold. You see yourself retracing Anne's final steps, just not sure which step you're on. Then one morning, you wake to news. The king's gone hunting. He didn't call for you. A simple message, but you know that's how the coldness begins. That's when you sit in your room, light filtering through stained glass, clutching the pillow you held when the king was near, and wonder, what will they write of me after I die? And when no answer comes, you realize, maybe no one will write anything at all, because if you die like Anne, you'll be erased, and that's more terrifying than the blade, not death, but oblivion. You know enough about Anne Boleyn to know you may die like her, not for a crime, but for loyalty that's lost its value. And you, like her, will have to hold your head high, walk out amid cold winds and downcast eyes, and smile as if you chose this path, when the truth is, it was paved for you the day you first wore the crown. You won't hear a loud knock or heralded announcements delivered to your room. There's no chaotic scene, no screams or cries. The first signal that you're about to be arrested in the Tudor court is silence. So much silence. It's not just the absence of words, it's a thick atmosphere enveloping you, making every step heavy, every breath a burden, every glance avoid you, as if you carry an incurable disease. You'll notice it in how the maids no longer address you as before, gliding through your room with quick, fleeting looks, never lingering. You'll hear whispers echoing in dark corridors, but when you approach, they vanish, as if someone drew a curtain. Breakfasts grow cold, devoid of light jests or small compliments, replaced by hushed murmurs and probing stares among noblewomen. The king suddenly stops summoning you to important ceremonies, private meetings or intimate moments once your privilege. You feel excised from the court's orbit, not by a direct blow but by a thin mist wrapping around you, choking your breath. No one tells you you're suspected, no one hands you an indictment, no sentence is proclaimed, just a quiet stripping of power, voice and presence. You'll notice letters no longer reach you, familiar servants turn distant, paintings you hung are moved, feasts where you were the center now leave you a faint shadow in attendees' memories. Silence cloaks you like a piercing cold wind, the fragments of power and status you once held now falling to the ground, unclaimed. You'll grasp for any sign of attention, a compliment, a caring glance, but find emptiness. You start doubting yourself, wondering if you did something wrong, or if someone lied to the king about you, but no one answers. No one offers comfort or warning. You feel a loneliness so painful it aches. Though you're still surrounded by servants, nobles, and gilded walls, silence becomes your most dangerous enemy, making you suspect everyone, even yourself. You'll wonder, is this the first sign of a long-planned trap? a snare you can't escape. As the silence stretches, conversations halt when you enter a room, eyes dim, smiles turn forced. The palace, once your home, becomes a silent maze where everyone avoids you like an invisible monster. You'll sense the shift when your closest maids are suddenly gone, reassigned to serve women the king now favors. You'll hear whispers of plots planned not just against you, but for the dynasty's future. In those moments, loneliness engulfs you, heavier than any blade or spear. You'll realize that in the Tudor court, no scream or cry is permitted louder than this deadly silence, a silence heralding the end of a reign, a power, and sometimes, a life. You might try to break it by questioning, pleading, or begging the king, but silence can't be persuaded or defeated. It's a silent judgment, the final verdict before night falls. And when you realize silence is the only voice left for you, that's when you know you're about to be arrested, about to be thrust into a no-exit game, where the outcome is always ruin. All that remains is waiting, preparing for the moment when the quiet curtain rises, and history's blade falls in silence, without a cry for help. That's the first signal, and it never comes with sound. You sleep soundly in the cold stone chamber of the palace, blankets covering you but unable to shield the fear, creeping into every corner of your mind. Your sleep is broken by a cautious knock, not a sound of safety, but the chime of fate at your life's door. Guards stand outside, their eyes cold and emotionless, offering no greeting, only a curt command. Your Majesty, please come with us. You have no choice but to follow, though your heart feels ready to stop. You're led to a small room deep within the palace, where dim lamplight falls on a plain wooden table, scarred by countless secret talks. Waiting there are stern faces, court judges, powerful men holding life and death in their hands, dressed in splendor, but with eyes sharp as blades. They don't invite you to sit. You stand forbidden to speak until questioned, certainly not to show disrespect. The first question rings out, grave and cold as winter snow. Your Majesty, do you know why you've been summoned here? You bite your lip, striving for calm, but your answer could be the first bullet in a trial with no defense. One small misstep, an unclear response, or even a reverted glance could be twisted into charges of treason, adultery, or plotting against the king. They question your private relationships, late-night meetings with guards or nobles. They demand lists of your servants, friends, and anyone who heard your secrets. Each question stabs your heart, leaving no room for mercy or leniency. The judges use your words, your expressions, to paint a portrait of guilt you never committed. You try to stay calm, answering truthfully, but you know truth doesn't always save you. They ask if you joined secret meetings, kept letters with suspected traitors, or spoke ill of the king. They say the court harbors plotters, and the kingdom's safety depends on the queen's absolute loyalty. You know that even proving your innocence won't guarantee your life. Here, justice isn't truth, it's power, decided by those at the questioning table. The interrogation may drag on for hours, even overnight, with no rest, food or water, only harsh stares and ceaseless scribbling. You're pressed to confess, to admit or defend things you never did, because silence can be read as guilt. Many queens before you couldn't stay composed in this ordeal, and their collapse became proof of guilt. You know every action, word and expression in that room can be used to build a pre-written story. A story where the protagonist is a traitor, a cursed woman, a danger to the court. When the trial ends, whether you're freed or condemned, you're no longer the same. Your reputation is stained, the king's trust may waver, and court enemies will pounce to bring you down. You return to your room in darkness, mind in turmoil, hands trembling as you clutch a soft pillow you never knew you'd need to hold so tightly to keep from sobbing. You tell yourself to be strong, to keep playing the role, to maintain the queen's image in public eyes. But deep down, you know this interrogation wasn't just today's test. It's a sentence for your entire life, a verdict with no precedent or appeal, only the dark silence of death waiting at the corridor's end. And you, called a Tudor queen, can only pray for a small miracle, that this time, dawn's light won't be the glow of torches on the scaffold. You might think an execution requires a real crime, a public sentence, and clear evidence. But in the Tudor court, it doesn't. A hastily written poem, a fleeting glance, or a single rumor can upend your fate. Whispers in the palace's shadows are sharper than swords or knives. A poem you read privately, hinting at love, power, or betrayal, could be copied by a disgruntled servant and passed to your enemies. A glance at a guard, even by chance, can spark rumors of an illicit affair, and in a world where trust is a luxury, those rumors become lethal evidence. You could be accused of plotting to overthrow the king, planting enemies in court, or betraying through whispers with foes, all from a poorly timed word or misunderstood act. Court trials aren't based on justice, but on fear, suspicion, and dark political schemes. Some queens were convicted on vague charges like adultery, treason, or witchcraft, with no solid proof. They were paraded before the public in trials staged to bolster the king's power and deter defiance. You get no chance to defend yourself, as every word is twisted to fit what others want to hear. A glance could be seen as defiance, a laugh as mockery, a kind word as scheming. Those around you, maids, officials, nobles, can turn enemies when they see a chance to advance by accusing you. You feel alone in a sea of people, unsure who's truly kind, who's quietly setting your trap. Then, one unannounced day, a letter, an accusation, or a fabricated tale, based on false evidence, brings you to your final trial. There, you can't cry, protest, or show weakness. Astrabes must remain steadfast to the end, no matter how broken you are inside. When the executioner raises his sword, you feel history's coldness, where life and death hinge on a glance, a word, or a rumor. And whatever happens, your story becomes a lesson for those who follow. In the Tudor court, power is a double-edged blade, and one tiny slip can cost your life. You never thought the cold, mossy stone walls of the Tower of London would become your regular abode. But when the death knell rings in your mind, and interrogations with endless accusations stretch into the night, you know your new home won't be the palace's splendid chambers, but the dark, damp, stifling cells of England's most infamous prison. The Tower isn't just a fortress, it's a symbol of absolute power, where queens fell into the court's final trap. As you pass through the heavy iron gate, the smell of mold, stone, and loneliness wraps you like an inescapable cloak. You're led to a small, cold room with a tiny window high on the ceiling, dim light, and whistling wind through stone cracks, whispering of past sorrows. The icy stone floor seeps into your bones, and the thick walls echo sounds as if reminding you, this is where dark secrets are buried, where every sigh and sob is swallowed by darkness. You lie on a creaky wooden bed, under a tattered blanket, feeling aches spread through you, not just from confinement, but from dread that tomorrow may not be yours. Your servants, now mere shadows, occasionally bring a bowl of cold porridge and stale water, with no comfort or encouraging glance. The menu here isn't for those holding power, but for prisoners, plain, tasteless, sparse. You recall the palace's lavish feasts, where laughter echoed through halls, food arranged like art, and wonder where you went wrong to end up a ghost in this dungeon. Tower nights aren't for sleep, but for wakefulness and grim thoughts. You hear guards' footsteps, distant church bells marking time's passage, but no one asks if you're well or need anything. Instead, a thick silence engulfs you, as if the stone walls swallow you whole, with no escape. Each day mirrors the last, except you know it could end at any moment. Some survivors said that in confinement, they faced ultimate fear, not of death, but of oblivion, absolute loneliness, and unceasing doubt. You understand you're not just physically imprisoned, but chained by plots, betrayal, and nameless despair. Yet you can't let fear destroy you. You must stay healthy, keep your mind sharp, because execution day could come unannounced. You spend time reflecting on the past, unfulfilled dreams, laughter in the palace now a hazy memory. You think of the future, of children, loved ones beyond these walls, though many have abandoned you. But in the quietest moments, you tell yourself that whatever happens, you'll leave as a woman who knows her worth, who stood by the throne with fleeting pride. You brace for tomorrow, perhaps your last, with the courage and calm only those facing death can muster. You close your eyes, hearing the wind's whistle outside, like the murmurs of those who went before, vowing not to become another faded shadow in history, but a story told, however brief, with strength and meaning. The Tower of London, the Tudor Queen's dungeon, isn't just a prison for the body, but a crucible for the soul, marking the end of a journey full of schemes and tears. And you, though facing the final curtain, hold a flame within, a queen's flame that won't be extinguished. You might be Anne of Cleves, a name less emotionally charged than Henry VIII's earlier wives, yet a living testament to a rare escape in the Tudor court's brutal power game, divorced but thriving. When Henry first saw her in Hans Holbein's portrait, he hoped she'd be the ideal queen, bringing stability to a teetering dynasty. But when Anne stepped into the palace, reality fell short of the dream. Not because she lacked virtue or charm, but because there was no spark, no burning love like in epic tales. Henry bluntly said, "I cannot take her as my wife," a stark rejection, no sugarcoating, that any woman in court would recognize as a sign of danger. But remarkably, instead of meeting the fate of prior queens, Anne played a different game. She didn't try to please Henry at all costs or become a shadow of past wives. She chose wisely and decisively, accept divorce without a fuss. Divorce in Tudor times wasn't just paperwork. It was breaking a sacred contract between king and queen, highly sensitive, potentially seen as an insult to the king's power, shaking public opinion. Yet Anne deftly turned it into a personal victory. She received rare privileges, a generous pension, a beautiful castle to live in, and a title still intact, living undisturbed as royal kin. No one touched her. She could move freely, host guests, attend small feasts, even play with children in the garden. She could wear the finest gowns without worrying about hateful glares or betrayal rumors. She thrived while others were swept into the dark vortex of power and destruction. Anne of Cleves is a symbol of surviving beyond tragedy, not the ideal Tudor queen of power, but a model of survival, adaptability, and holding on to freedom within harsh limits. Anne's story tells you that in the Tudor court, sometimes it's not the grandest victor who survives, but the one who knows when to retreat, not striving too hard, not aiming too high, and not losing herself in power games. And you, if you're Anne, would know divorce isn't failure, but a way to keep your life and peace in a world where those are worth more than gold or jewels. You'd learn that thriving sometimes isn't living in the spotlight, but in quiet shadows, where no one watches, no one judges, and you can be yourself, even if in silence. You won't be loved or admired by the king, but you'll live. And in the Tudor court, living is the greatest victory. You step onto the execution scaffold under the pale light of a gloomy morning, not as one redeemed, but as a lamb led to slaughter. London's crowd gathers thickly on stone steps, faces eager, eyes fixed on you, as if watching a tragic yet mesmerizing play. They bring pastries, snacks, and wine bottles, as if this is a bizarrely anticipated picnic. A Tudor execution isn't just punishment, it's a grand social event, a public stage where power and fear perform under the crowd's glaring light. You walk through the throng, hearing murmurs, whispers, sometimes mocking laughter, and eyes brimming with curiosity and scorn. Children are hoisted by parents for a better view. Men drink and recount tales of others who stood where you stand. Women warn their young to avoid the path to this block. You're led to a prepared wooden block where the axe will fall. It's no warm or safe place. It's where your sighs become a death knell, where dreams, fears, and hopes vanish in a moment. Officials stand around, faces stone cold, holding papers listing charges you can't refute. A priest lays a hand on your head, praying for your soul, but his words can't ease physical pain or inner shame. You bow your head, steeling yourself, eyes fixed on a distant horizon where the life you knew is now past. The crowd doesn't hush. They cheer, clap, mingled with stifled sobs from loved ones barred from nearing. The execution becomes a spectacle, a lesson for those daring to challenge the king's absolute power. As you lie on the block, feeling cold seep into your flesh, your breath quickens, heart pounding to break free. The executioner raises his sword, sunlight glinting on cold steel, and in that moment, your life flashes like a reel. False smiles, unseen tears, betrayed vows, and secrets never told. One stroke, blood sprays, your head falls. The executioner's cry pierces the air, blending with the crowd's cheers. Then silence. You're no longer a person, just a name etched in history with a cold full stop. But behind it is a story of life, pain, and crushed hopes. You become a lesson for those who follow. No one, not even a queen, escapes the Tudor court's trap of power and cruel fate. The pastries and wine in the crowd's hands today aren't just food but symbols of cruelty dressed in festivity. They see you not as a person but as a performance, an event for entertainment and power's affirmation. In their eyes, you're no longer a queen, but the end of a tear and blood-filled tale. You once thought being a king's wife would be a life of glamour, fame, and limitless power, but being married to a powerful, unstable king like Henry VIII is a cunning trap cloaked in the gold of thrones and lavish feasts. It's a life where you not only face pressure to bear a male heir, but live in the constant flux of a husband's emotions and power, who might love you passionately today and order your beheading tomorrow without hesitation. Henry VIII, known for his erratic temper, hunger for power, and sudden rages, turns his wives' lives into perilous political chess games, where one wrong move could mean death. You must learn to read the subtlest signals in his eyes, his half-true jests, his unclear gestures, to know if you're still loved or the next target of a sharp blade. Life in the palace isn't for the faint-hearted or naive. Every breath, every small gesture is watched. Every action can be misread, twisted into evidence of plots you never conceived. The king's instability comes not just from his temper, but from shifting politics, religion, and power struggles in court. You bear the direct consequences of those upheavals. When one faction rises, you're tied to another. When the king changes his mind, you're a traitor. When war breaks out, you're the pawn sacrificed. The cruelest part is that no matter how hard you try, how much you please the king, it's never enough to stay safe. The wives before you are living proof of fate's mercilessness, from steadfast Catherine of Aragon, exiled in misery, to captivating Anne Boleyn, betrayed and beheaded, gentle Jane Seymour, dead in childbirth, to youthful Catherine Howard, executed for past mistakes. You learn that in a life with a powerful, unstable husband, love isn't a foundation but a sweet trap leading to the abyss. You must choose between pleasing the king or keeping yourself, between surviving and losing your soul. Some nights you lie awake hearing the king's heavy steps in the corridor, wondering if he's the caring king or the cruel one today. Sometimes you feel utterly alone amid courtiers' fake laughter and calculating eyes. You can't share that pain, as speaking it risks making you the next target. In this game, there's no true winner, only temporary survivors. Yet you must keep walking, playing the perfect wife, hiding true emotions, pretending you don't know fate's constant shifts could sweep you away. You learn to smile when you don't want to, speak sweetly when filled with rage, and swallow betrayal in the palace you once called home. The cost of being a powerful, unstable king's wife isn't just your life, but the loss of self, crushed dreams, and love turned into a tool of power. You realize your existence doesn't rest on love or loyalty, but on luck, cunning, and the ability to play the survival game with those around you. Ultimately, you know the throne isn't a symbol of power, but a blade ever poised, and you, though a queen, are just a pawn on history's brutal chessboard. You don't hear screams or see chaos, only the blades whistle through the foggy morning air at the Tower of London. The head, severed from the body, rolls a few times on the cold stone, staining the rough cobbles with fresh blood. Blood splashes onto lace-trimmed garments, onto faces around, a horrific, bloody spectacle the crowd craves, yet a chilling warning to those daring to enter the Tudor court's deadly power spiral. It's the moment a life ends, one that lived, loved, cried, laughed, perhaps dreamed of freedom. Now, just a soulless head, a stark object before the world, but perhaps more terrifying than death is the gradual forgetting that follows. After the blood dries, the cries fade, and the crowd disperses. Few will remember you. You become a blur in history's flow, a name passing in dusty books, a tale whispered as a cautionary lesson. You're no longer a person with emotions, ambitions, or dreams, just a mark on a page. Head falls, blood spills, and then an endless silence. That's the end many Tudor queens faced. Those who once held absolute power, the kingdom's center, now linger as faint memories, shadows in recollection. No farewell ballad, no grand funeral, no wails of grief. Perhaps only leaves falling gently on an unmarked grave, buried in silence and oblivion. In your final moments, as you lay your head on the cold block, you can't know if you'll be remembered or simply forgotten forever. That's the price of power in the Tudor dynasty. A game where death isn't the worst fate, but history's silence is the longest sentence. You imagine you've passed through the gate of death, heard the blades whistle, and felt the icy breath of mortality close by, but then some miracle happens, and you're still alive. Yes, in the Tudor court, not everyone falls before the scaffold. History's rare fragments record that some queens, after falling from favor or under suspicion, weren't executed, but spared, though that's hardly salvation. Surviving in a world where every second of your life is scrutinized doesn't mean freedom. It's merely the start of a new journey, one of exile, isolation, and oblivion. If you're pardoned, you're stripped of all power, banished to remote castles or isolated places where you're a shadow of yourself. The days that follow are a chain of close surveillance, with no one truly trusting you, no one truly wanting you to exist. You live in darkness, barred from royal events, forbidden from meeting the royal family, even stripped of the Queen's title. You're voiceless, imprisoned in deliberate oblivion. Your enemies in court continue to slander, spread rumors, and pressure you to vanish entirely from the kingdom's living history. You're not invited to feasts, excluded from festivals, and every offer or concern feels like a test to see if you're still alive or already dead. In that isolation, you face unspoken pain, profound loneliness, betrayal by those who once called you your majesty, and the creeping sense of being forgotten, like a frail candle before the wind. But the worst isn't the isolation, it's the loss of self. You look in the mirror and see a woman no longer a queen, no longer loved, just a shadow of who you were. You wonder if this survival is truly life, or merely a mournful existence, waiting for the day your name is officially erased from history's pages. Some queens who survived the shock of disgrace lived out their days in desolate castles, poorer than servants, yet never complaining. They kept their silence like a painful secret. Some even inspired later generations, not through power or fame, but through resilience and acceptance of a cruel fate. But you, in this moment, know only that survival is a trap, an endless trial where you fight not for power, but to preserve your life and the scraps of dignity left. And if you think being spared offers a chance to redeem or start anew, you're mistaken. In the Tudor court, surviving disgrace is an unending exile where you befriend oblivion and pain. You may lose everything, love, power, honor, but the greatest cost is vanishing from the eyes of the world, forgotten like an unfinished dream. In your loneliest moment, you realize death might be a release, but survival is a prolonged sentence. You ask yourself, do you have the courage to endure this survival? The strength to face days imprisoned in oblivion? Can you live without being yourself? These are questions without answers that you must answer alone, in the darkness of a life, after the throne, when all lights dim, and you remain just a person, a soul, no longer a queen. Imagine living in a world where every word, glance, and gesture is scrutinized more closely than light in a sealed room. A place where you don't need a cold blade from an executioner to be truly finished. Just being erased, confined in silence, or gradually forgotten is enough to kill your soul. Tudor women didn't die only by the blade. They died by silence, a noiseless, tearless death harsher than any sword. In the court, you could be pushed to the margins, not by an accusation, but by no one mentioning you anymore. You're no longer named at feasts, banquets, or key meetings. You're no longer acknowledged by the king or the target of curious or jealous eyes. You're forgotten like a dusty old painting on a wall. That silence is a slow poison seeping into your soul, leaving you utterly alone, stripped of the life you once had. You won't be chained in a dungeon or beheaded on a scaffold, but you'll feel this slow death every day, every hour. You wake each morning to no greetings, no eye contact, no words of comfort or inquiries about your health. Your closest maids turn cold, friends become strangers. At meals, you sit alone, hearing laughter from nearby rooms, a reminder you're out of the game. You can't speak or resist, as this silence is guarded by power, fear, and those who exploit it to hold their place. You want to keep your honor, but as no one mentions you, honor fades into a shadow in others' memories. You feel like an invisible person, a figure erased from history's fading canvas. That's the silent death, the quiet despair no sword can match. In that silence, you have no allies, no defenders, no laws to protect you. You can only protect yourself by staying quieter, avoiding eyes, retreating into shadows, waiting for the day you no longer exist in any story. Tudor women didn't die only by blades. They died by isolation, oblivion, and removal from all they once called life. And in that silence, sometimes real death, isn't the end, but an endless journey where you lose life, faith, and self, until you're just a faint memory in others' eyes. You might imagine a Tudor queen's death comes only from cold blades, merciless judgments from the king, or harsh sentences pronounced in court trials, but not always. Take Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife, who didn't lose her head on the scaffold, but died as many women of her time did, in childbirth. Jane entered the Tudor court in a chaotic era, after the king's tumultuous marriages, filled with controversy, hatred, and tragedy. She was seen as a fresh breeze, a bringer of hope for the dynasty, expected to bear the heir everyone awaited. Gentle, obedient, neither too prominent nor too dull, Jane was a balance, a safe harbor, amid a storm of power and suspicion. Then, under those harsh expectations, Jane became pregnant. The court watched her every day, every heartbeat in her womb, like a drum, urging fate. Childbirth in Tudor times wasn't simple or routine. No anesthetics, no machines, no specialized doctors, just aged midwives with hard-earned experience, prayers, and life or death oaths. Each labor was a battle for survival, a gamble staking both mother and child. Jane endured it with silent courage, hoping fiercely to see a healthy son, to hold him in her arms. And then, Edward was born, the son Henry VIII dreamed of, the glorious heir to the Tudor dynasty. Joy and celebration swept through, but none knew that behind the newborn's cries were the mother's gasps, her pain growing ever worse. Jane wasn't as fortunate as the wives before or after her. She died from postpartum complications, an infection untreatable by the era's medicine. Her death shocked not just the king, but the entire court. Henry wept, truly wept, not for a political gain, not for a head laid on a cold block, but for the loss of a wife, the mother of his most cherished son. Jane Seymour's death made people see the fragility of life in the court, where power and love intertwined in every breath, dream and death. I for you, standing on the Tudor fate's tightrope, Jane's story reminds you that not only blades, but the most ordinary things, like childbirth, can take your life. You may not be condemned for treason, accused of witchcraft, or stripped of your title in a dramatic trial, but you could still fall in a small room, amid faint breaths and anxious eyes, with only servants and midwives knowing your true pain. Jane Seymour's death reveals another side of Tudor royal life, the vulnerability of women in a society where everything is measured by power and the ability to bear sons. You may be loved, cherished, cared for meticulously, but facing the life or death of motherhood, you can't escape. And when you fall, the king will weep, but weeping won't bring you back. You know your story will be told not just as a personal tragedy, but as part of the Tudor legend, women who were queens, wives, yet couldn't escape fate's cruel hand. You thought being loved, valued, was the surest foundation, but in the Tudor court, it's only the first step. The next, sometimes final, step is facing a silent death, without blazing lights, just a deep, eternal silence. And you, if you're Jane Seymour, passed through that door, not by a blade, but by the quietest female battle, childbirth. You might wonder, after all the tragedy, cold deaths, ceaseless struggles, and silent oblivion, why women still dared to ascend the Tudor throne. Why were they willing to stake their lives, honor, and souls on a king who could love and behead them in a heartbeat? The answer isn't simple, but it's not vague either. It's a complex mix of power, fame, love, ambition, and survival. First, the throne is the ultimate symbol of power in a world where power is defined by controlling others' fates. For many Tudor women, being queen wasn't just a title, but a chance to claim status, to be seen and respected in a society that often diminished women. Everyone knew being queen wasn't easy, but it was the shortest path to power and influence they couldn't otherwise attain. They accepted the cost of instability and danger, because some things were worth more than life. Power, a voice in court, the chance to shape history. Second, for some, the throne was a way to seek recognition and express themselves. A way to break free from societal limits on women, to become the center of attention and influence. A symbol of the perfection they aimed for. They weren't just shadows in the harem, but shapers of destiny, though often a fragile, brittle one. Third, love and hope played a key role. Some ascended the throne, believing they could change fate, find true love, make the powerful king a better husband, though reality often brought betrayal, loneliness, and pain. Hope persisted like a small flame, lighting their darkest days. Fourth, some were forced onto the throne by duty, family, or political arrangements. They had little choice, no chance to refuse or retreat. It was the only path to protect themselves and their kin, to avoid abandonment or destruction in the court's relentless struggles. Finally, it was the courage, the extraordinary resilience of Tudor women. They knew the dangers, the traps, yet chose to face them, to walk on, because they understood power didn't come from safety, but from rising after falls, from holding on to themselves in a world of enemies. They were warriors in an endless battle, tellers of stories few dared hear, flames burning quietly in history's cold. So despite knowing the cost, seeing those before them fall, women still stepped onto the Tudor throne, not just to live, but to fight, to survive, to leave their mark on history, whether in blood or tears. That's the story of life, power, faith, and unforgettable sacrifices. And you, if part of that story, remember you're not alone. You walk the path of the greatest women, though it's fraught with thorns and peril. The story of Tudor women, queens living amid power and instability, enduring survival's pressures, fighting to preserve life in a world rife with schemes, betrayal, and danger, though centuries old, holds profound lessons for modern life, especially in today's United States, where freedom, human rights, and gender equality are cherished. First, from the lives of queens like Anne Boleyn, executed over mere rumors, or Jane Seymour, who died in childbirth under pressure to produce a male heir, we see how societal expectations and external pressures can destroy a life if one doesn't protect and uphold personal worth. In modern America, though no longer executed or tortured for gossip, we still face judgment, bias from society, work, even social media, where a word or act can be misconstrued and spread rapidly. The Tudor Queen's lesson is vigilance in communication, controlling one's image, and most importantly, holding fast to core values and confidence amid societal pressures. Second, the instability and power the queens faced show that power doesn't always bring safety or happiness. In modern society, many prioritize power or success above all, neglecting balance in life, mental health, and personal relationships. The Tudor story reminds us that seeking inner stability and building trusted relationships are vital, more than chasing external fame. Finally, the image of queens like Anne of Cleves, who chose divorce and thrived, underscores the value of freedom and the ability to choose one's life. In the US, where personal freedom is revered, this lesson encourages us not to fear tough decisions to protect ourselves, even if they invite judgment. In sum, the Tudor story isn't just a bloody history, but a profound reminder of resilience, strength, wise choices, and the value of personal freedom, qualities that can help us live happily and successfully in today's volatile American society. If you found the dramatic story of the Tudor queens and its lessons compelling, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next thrilling journey through history's surprises.